"Hands off this property." The words echoed across the dirt road before any headlights had even reached the old wooden fence, and Olivia Johnson froze mid-step, her hands still resting on the handle of the weathered bucket she had been carrying from the barn. The evening sky stretched wide, tinged with the soft pink and orange of a setting sun, and the air carried the scent of tilled soil and fresh hay, warm and earthy. From the gravel driveway, the low hum of approaching vehicles grew steadily, the rhythmic crunch of tires over loose stones signaling the arrival of unwanted authority. 2 patrol cars emerged from the shadows of the oak-lined path, their red and blue lights cutting through the dusk, reflecting on the farm's faded white paint and the chrome of rusted farm equipment. Officer Blake Carter stepped out first, tall, rigid in his uniform, eyes scanning the field like a predator assessing prey, his hand resting casually near his belt, the faint weight of authority in every measured movement. Beside him, Sergeant Mike Reynolds followed, nodding to the younger officers as they fanned out, the beam of their flashlights slicing through the encroaching darkness. Olivia shifted slightly, her worn boots sinking into the soft dirt, the gentle creak of the bucket in her grip a faint counterpoint to the tense silence between the lines of approaching men. She glanced at the horizon, the distant hills painted in streaks of gold, taking a slow, steadying breath that carried the warmth of resilience and the coolness of evening air, grounding her as she readied herself for the confrontation she had anticipated but not yet hoped for. Her mother's farmhouse, a modest structure with peeling paint and a sagging roof, had stood on this land for generations, each plank and stone imbued with family history, and now, faced with the looming presence of the law, it seemed to hold its breath alongside her. The first officer's voice broke the stillness, firm but not raised. "We received reports of trespassing and potential threats on this property. Step aside, ma'am." Olivia's hand tightened slightly on the bucket, the wooden surface rough against her palms, her posture straightening as the wind rustled through the nearby corn stalks, bending them gently but firmly against the earth. Her gaze lifted to meet Blake Carter's, steady and unwavering, unflinching even as the flashlights highlighted the fine lines of tension in his face. "You're not going to scare me away," she said calmly, the words carrying over the subtle hum of insects beginning their night chorus and the faint creak of the barn doors swinging with the breeze. The young patrol officers exchanged nervous glances, their breath visible in the cooling air, unsure of how to interpret the quiet defiance of a single woman standing her ground in the amber glow of the evening. Every detail seemed amplified, the distant lowing of cattle, the faint rustle of wind through the trees, the uneven tilt of the fence posts marking the boundary of her land, and the metallic glint of a water trough catching the last of the sunlight. Olivia shifted the bucket slightly, the soft scrape against the wooden floor of the porch sounding louder than expected in the tension-charged space, and she felt the familiar pulse of calm determination steady her heartbeat. She had faced scrutiny, judgment, and underestimation many times before, yet there was a clarity in her eyes that neither the flash of patrol lights nor the commanding tone of Sergeant Reynolds could shake. "This is my family's land," she continued, her voice a gentle but firm anchor against the rising anxiety in the scene, "and I will not let it be taken from us without cause." The wind carried her words across the field, brushing against the tall grass, rustling through the cornstalks, and even as the officers advanced a step forward, the weight of her resolve hung palpably in the air, a quiet but unyielding force against the authority moving toward her. The distant hills softened in shadow, the sun now almost fully dipped below the horizon, casting long, stretching silhouettes across the farm, the glow of the patrol car's lights now more pronounced against the deepening dusk. Olivia's fingers brushed the handle of the bucket once more, grounding her as she surveyed her surroundings, the empty barn to her left, the small garden patches to her right, and the long stretch of driveway leading to the road where the vehicles had come from. Each detail of the farm spoke of care, labor, and history, and each detail now seemed to pulse with the same defiance that ran through her veins. She inhaled slowly, feeling the scent of hay and earth fill her lungs, anchoring her to the moment, aware of every subtle movement of the officers as they adjusted their positions, their shadows stretching long across the field, their flashlights probing the darkness but finding nothing to intimidate her. In that suspended space, every sound was amplified. The distant hoot of an owl, the whisper of leaves, the soft shuffle of a boot in the dirt, and the gentle creak of the farmhouse doors swinging with the wind. Olivia Johnson stood tall, her gaze steady, shoulders squared, heart beating with a rhythm of quiet courage, fully aware that whatever came next would test the limits of authority, resilience, and the unseen strength that had carried her through every challenge, and she would face it without flinching as the first stars began to prick the evening sky, faint and steady, like the promise of support yet to arrive. Olivia Johnson took a slow, deliberate step back toward the farmhouse, her eyes scanning the horizon where the first stars were beginning to glimmer faintly against the deepening navy sky. The porch beneath her feet creaked softly as the wooden boards responded to her weight, the sound mingling with the gentle rustle of corn leaves in the evening breeze. She could see the silhouettes of the cattle grazing in the field, their forms blurred in the twilight, and the faint glimmer of the water trough reflecting the intermittent flashes from the patrol car's lights. Her hand rested lightly on the weathered doorframe as she inhaled the earthy scent of freshly turned soil mixed with the sweet aroma of hay, grounding herself in the familiar comfort of home while her mind worked quickly to assess the situation. Inside the kitchen, a kettle whistled softly on the stove, the faint sound punctuating the tense quiet outside, and Olivia's eyes flicked toward the small window over the sink, catching the warm glow of lamplight against the interior walls. Her thoughts moved to the animals she had tended that morning, to the rows of vegetables she had planted with her own hands, and to the history etched into every corner of this land by generations of her family. She could feel the gentle vibration of the farmhouse beneath her feet as a distant wind stirred the trees, sending a cascade of shadows across the walls and floor, shadows that seemed to mirror the unspoken tension gathering outside. Olivia's fingers brushed along the edge of the porch railing, the wood cool to the touch, and she could hear the faint call of an owl in the distance, its single note carrying through the night air and punctuating the delicate balance between calm and anticipation. Each step she took as she moved back into the farmhouse was measured, deliberate, as if she could command the space itself to hold steady, to respect her presence. She glanced at the framed photographs on the wall, her mother's smiling face captured in moments of everyday joy, reminders of resilience and strength passed down through generations. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional drip from the sink were the only sounds inside, yet they seemed amplified against the backdrop of distant headlights and the low murmur of voices outside. Olivia's gaze returned to the field, the cornstalks now swaying more prominently in the cooling night air, catching the light from the patrol cars in fleeting flashes, and she could feel the rhythm of her own heartbeat synchronizing with the subtle pulse of life around her, drawing calm from the land itself. She moved to the kitchen table, resting her palms on the smooth surface worn by years of use, feeling the history of countless meals, countless hands, each mark and scratch telling a story of care, diligence, and survival. From this vantage, she could see the driveway winding toward the distant road, the gravel faintly illuminated by the patrol lights, and she sensed the subtle shift in the officers' demeanor as they adjusted their positions, their movements cautious yet deliberate, attempting to gauge the character of the woman standing firm in front of them. Olivia allowed her eyes to drift over the farm again, taking in the rows of vegetables, the gentle rise of the pastures, the distant outline of the barn, and she drew a steadying breath, the cool night air filling her lungs and carrying with it the scent of rain on earth, a grounding reminder that she was home, that she had a place, that she was ready to protect what had been entrusted to her. Each sound, each flicker of light, each subtle movement of the officers was catalogued and measured in her mind, yet she remained unflinching, a steady presence amidst uncertainty, her calm determination radiating outward, setting the tone for the encounter, an invisible barrier of courage and resilience that no authority could easily breach as the first tendrils of night wrapped around the farmhouse and the land beyond, holding space for whatever would come next. Sergeant Mike Reynolds stepped forward, his polished boots crunching lightly against the gravel, the soft glow of the patrol car lights reflecting off the metal badge pinned firmly to his chest. Officer Blake Carter lingered beside him, arms folded, his sharp gaze sweeping the farmhouse and the surrounding pastures as if trying to measure the resolve of the woman standing there. Olivia Johnson did not flinch, her posture unwavering as she shifted slightly to position herself closer to the porch, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of the wooden railing, the subtle texture grounding her in the present while her mind mapped every movement of the officers before her. The cornstalks swayed gently in the cool evening breeze, their leaves rustling softly and mingling with the distant lowing of the cattle, creating a backdrop of calm normalcy that contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from the patrol cars. Olivia's eyes scanned the horizon where the tree line marked the boundary of her family's land, noting the silhouettes of the barn and the garden she had planted, each detail of the property imbued with history and care, a testament to the life she had built with her own hands. Blake Carter shifted his weight, the leather of his belt creaking faintly, and spoke in a measured tone. "We need to conduct a routine check of the property, ma'am. Please cooperate and step aside." Olivia inhaled deeply, the cool night air filling her lungs, carrying with it the earthy scent of the fields and the faint sweetness of hay drying in the barn. Her gaze lifted steadily to meet his, steady and resolute, refusing to give any indication of fear or hesitation. "This is our home," she said evenly, her voice carrying clearly across the soft expanse of the farm, "and I will not allow anyone to cross this land without understanding what it means to us." The young officers exchanged uncertain glances, their movements hesitant as they fanned out slightly, the glow from their flashlights creating shifting shadows across the ground, illuminating the rows of corn and the outline of the farmhouse with an almost ethereal light. Olivia adjusted the bucket she had been carrying earlier, letting it rest lightly against her hip, her eyes never leaving Blake Carter, reading the subtle shifts in his expression, the tightening of his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes as he processed the unwavering determination of the woman before him. Each element of the farm seemed to come alive in that moment. The faint creak of the barn door swinging with the wind, the reflective glint of the water trough under the patrol lights, the gentle sway of the fence posts marking the perimeter of the property, and the distant silhouette of the hills fading into the twilight. Olivia took another deliberate step back toward the farmhouse, her boots pressing into the soft earth, grounding herself further as she considered the lines of sight and the potential paths of approach, aware that every movement mattered, that every small detail of the farm and its surroundings could convey strength or vulnerability to those observing. The wind carried faint whispers through the corn, brushing against the sides of the barn and the edge of the porch, and Olivia let her eyes drift over the landscape, taking in the soft undulations of the fields, the distant cluster of trees, and the quiet stability of her land, as if drawing reassurance from the very ground beneath her feet. She allowed a subtle shift of her weight to signal presence without. Aggression, her shoulders squared, her back straight, her gaze steady and deliberate, anchoring herself to the calm authority that had guided her through countless moments of challenge. Inside the farmhouse, the warm glow from the kitchen spilled softly through the windows, the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock creating a sense of rhythm and continuity that contrasted with the tentative movements outside. Olivia's mind traced the familiar layout of the rooms, the location of doors and windows, the vantage points for observing the surroundings, all while maintaining a clear focus on the officers who now paused slightly, assessing her actions and the quiet strength she projected. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and growing crops, and Olivia stood firm, a quiet sentinel of her home, embodying the calm resilience of someone intimately connected to the land and deeply aware of its rhythms, its history, and its protection, ready to maintain her ground while observing, calculating, and waiting for the next development to unfold in this delicate encounter. Olivia Johnson took a deep breath, the crisp night air filling her lungs as she lifted her chin, her eyes steady on Sergeant Mike Reynolds and Officer Blake Carter, who were pausing a few feet from the porch, their flashlights cutting narrow beams across the rows of corn and the gentle slope of the pastures. She could feel the weight of the quiet farm pressing around her, the familiar scent of earth and hay grounding her in the reality of her home, each detail of the land a reminder of the generations who had cultivated it before her. Olivia's hand moved instinctively to the gate latch, her fingers tracing the worn metal, the cool surface steadying her resolve as she prepared to speak with clarity and confidence, the kind that had been nurtured through years of tending both crops and family. She tilted her head slightly, allowing the light from the patrol cars to catch the determination in her gaze, making it unmistakably clear that this property was under her stewardship and that she would not falter under scrutiny. "These are my family's fields," she said evenly, her voice carrying over the subtle night sounds of frogs and crickets, the rhythmic croak and chirp punctuating her declaration. "And every inch has been cared for with patience, with respect, and with responsibility. I am accountable for what happens here, and I expect the same consideration from anyone who comes onto this land." The officers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces as they adjusted their footing, the ground beneath them uneven and softened by the evening dew. Blake Carter's eyes narrowed briefly, measuring the depth of her resolve, noting the calm strength with which she projected authority despite the apparent imbalance of power between a single mother and the uniformed officers before her. Olivia shifted slightly, her boots sinking into the soft dirt, and she could feel the tension in the air, a subtle vibration of anticipation that stretched the space between them like an invisible wire. Her gaze traveled to the barn in the distance, the roofline catching the last traces of daylight, the structure standing firm and steady, a visual metaphor for the stability and continuity she embodied. The faint illumination of the porch light reflected on the window panes, casting long, deliberate shadows across the farmhouse, each movement of the officers highlighted and softened by the interplay of light and darkness. Olivia's shoulders straightened, her stance deliberate, and she let her hands rest gently on the railing, conveying presence without aggression, patience without submission, a poised readiness that radiated from every measured motion. The subtle crunch of gravel underfoot from one of the patrol officers punctuated the evening calm, each step echoing faintly, yet Olivia remained composed, her mind cataloging each movement, each tone, each flicker of intent, aware of the delicate balance between assertion and diplomacy. She allowed her eyes to take in the landscape, the rows of crops stretching behind her, the fence posts marking boundaries with quiet authority, the subtle undulations of the pasture hills, each element a piece of a whole that she understood intimately and was determined to defend with unwavering clarity. The gentle rustle of the wind through the corn provided a soothing rhythm, a steadying accompaniment to her thoughts, while the distant stars began to pierce the sky, small and constant, providing a silent witness to the steadfastness she embodied. Olivia shifted her weight subtly, maintaining eye contact with Blake Carter as she spoke with calm authority, articulating her reasoning clearly and without hesitation, the cadence of her words measured, precise, and imbued with the certainty of someone deeply connected to both her home and her responsibilities. She could sense the officers absorbing her composure, their own uncertainty mirrored in the pause of their movements, the soft shuffle of feet against gravel, and the faint rustle of uniforms adjusting in the cool night air. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light became part of the silent negotiation, the unspoken dialogue of respect and assessment that passed between Olivia and the law, and she met it with steady poise, her presence a quiet yet resolute affirmation that she was not merely a figure within the scene, but its anchor, fully aware of the land, its history, and the protective claim she held over it. The farm, with its worn fences, rolling pastures, and modest structures, seemed to lean into her strength, the night air carrying a sense of continuity and resilience that matched the rhythm of her measured breathing and the focused beat of her heart as she prepared to engage the officers further, fully grounded in the certainty that she could defend her home through clarity, integrity, and unwavering resolve. The tension in the air thickened as Officer Blake Carter and Sergeant Mike Reynolds exchanged a glance, their expressions flickering between authority and hesitation, the beams of their flashlights catching the subtle movements of the cornstalks and the shadows of the cattle grazing quietly in the field. Olivia Johnson remained steadfast, her hands resting lightly on the porch railing, her posture straight and unwavering, eyes fixed calmly on the approaching figures as if measuring the space between assertion and respect. The distant hills, now mostly shadowed in the deepening night, created a natural frame around the farmhouse, amplifying the quiet determination that radiated from her presence. A soft wind whispered through the corn, carrying the faint scent of earth and hay, mingling with the subtle hum of insects beginning their nocturnal chorus, and Olivia allowed herself a single, measured breath to anchor the rising anticipation in her chest. Blake Carter stepped forward, his polished boots crunching the gravel in a rhythm that seemed to echo through the field, and he spoke with a controlled firmness that betrayed the cautious assessment of the situation. "Ma'am, we need to verify the reports. Please step aside and cooperate." Olivia tilted her head slightly, allowing the porch light to illuminate the subtle determination in her gaze, her voice steady as she replied, "I have nothing to hide, and yet this is our home. Every inch of this land has been cared for, nurtured, and protected, and I will not allow anyone to treat it as anything less than that." The young officers fidgeted slightly, the soft shuffle of boots against gravel mixing with the rustling leaves and distant calls of nocturnal birds, creating a soundscape where even the smallest motion seemed amplified, each note reinforcing the gravity of the encounter. Olivia's eyes swept across the field, noting the positions of the officers, the interplay of light and shadow on the fence posts, the silhouette of the barn, and the gentle slope of the pastures, each detail recorded and weighed in her mind as she maintained a calm and composed stance, embodying the quiet authority of someone intimately connected to the land. She shifted her weight subtly, grounding herself further, her hands moving lightly over the railing, the smooth wood a tactile reminder of stability and continuity, of the generations who had tended this farm before her, and the responsibilities she now upheld. The glow of the patrol lights created moving patterns across the field, illuminating patches of grass and reflecting off the distant water trough, the flickering light highlighting the careful balance between assertion and restraint in her posture. Olivia's voice rose just enough to carry over the ambient sounds, precise and clear. "I understand the importance of your duties, yet I also expect respect for the property and lives entrusted to this place. I ask that you observe and consider, not assume and command." The officers paused, the weight of her words sinking in, the hum of the vehicles and the faint creak of the farmhouse settling in the night air adding a measured rhythm to the moment. Each movement of the officers was met with a subtle, deliberate adjustment of her stance, a shift that communicated readiness without aggression, strength without confrontation, and her eyes remained locked on Blake Carter, reading the smallest cues, the narrowing of the eyes, the tilt of the head, the micro-expressions that hinted at internal calculation. The field seemed to hold its breath with her, the rustle of corn and the distant sound of livestock creating a muted symphony that underscored the calm determination she projected, a steadfast presence that neither rushed nor wavered, a quiet assertion of the balance between vigilance and authority. Olivia allowed her gaze to move slowly over the farmhouse, the porch light casting long shadows, the warm glow from the kitchen spilling faintly through the windows, and she took another measured breath, the cool night air mingling with the earthy scent of the farm, reinforcing her composure and focus. She felt the steady rhythm of her heartbeat align with the subtle vibrations of the earth beneath her boots, a grounding that amplified the clarity of thought and purpose that guided her next words, delivered with calm precision. "I am committed to this land and to the life it sustains. Please understand that this is not mere defiance, but care, respect, and responsibility." The officers shifted again, their earlier confidence tempered by the evident certainty and integrity projected by Olivia, the surrounding night amplifying the subtle tension and highlighting the quiet power of her presence, the soft swaying of corn, the gentle sigh of the wind, and the muted hum of distant life forming an auditory backdrop to the standoff where patience, observation, and unwavering resolve became as tangible as the soil and structures she stood beside. The night settled over the farm with a serene quiet that contrasted sharply with the earlier tension, the faint hum of distant crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves creating a backdrop of calm that seemed almost deliberate, as if the land itself were breathing and settling into a state of observation. Olivia Johnson stood near the edge of the porch, her fingers lightly brushing the railing, the worn wood smooth beneath her touch, and she allowed herself a slow, measured exhale that carried the scent of earth and hay into the cool night air. The porch light cast a gentle amber glow, illuminating her calm face and the subtle determination in her eyes, the shadows playing across her features in a pattern that shifted with the gentle sway of the nearby cornstalks. She could hear the soft, tentative movements of Officer Blake Carter and Sergeant Mike Reynolds as they paused to reassess, the subtle shuffling of boots against gravel and the faint rustle of uniform fabric blending with the distant lowing of cattle and the soft whistle of wind through the fields. Olivia tilted her head slightly, her gaze extending beyond the immediate perimeter of the farmhouse to the gentle slopes of the pastures, noting the distant outline of the barn and the neatly kept garden patches, each element a testament to care, diligence, and continuity. The soft glint of the water trough in the fading light of the patrol vehicle's illumination caught her attention, reflecting tiny points of light like stars against the dark soil, grounding her in the familiar geography of her home while providing subtle cues for maintaining awareness. Olivia drew another calm breath, the cool air carrying the scent of damp earth and the subtle sweetness of evening blossoms, and she allowed her shoulders to relax slightly while maintaining the unwavering posture that projected quiet authority. Every small sound, the distant bark of a dog, the faint hoot of an owl, the whispering rustle of leaves, seemed amplified in the stillness, each note a marker in the flow of time that Olivia used to gauge the situation, her mind cataloging movements, positions, and light patterns with practiced precision. She shifted lightly, her boots pressing into the soft earth, grounding her further, and her eyes remained fixed on the officers, absorbing the subtle shifts in their stance and the nuances in their expressions, the narrowing of eyes, the slight tilts of heads, the micro-expressions that hinted at reconsideration and reflection. Inside the farmhouse, the warm glow of the kitchen spilled faintly through the windows, the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the wall clock providing a steady rhythm that contrasted with the carefully measured movements outside, reinforcing a sense of order and continuity. Olivia allowed her gaze to wander once more over the field, the rows of crops gently swaying in the evening breeze, the fence posts standing like quiet sentinels marking boundaries, each shadow and line of sight noted and integrated into her awareness, projecting an aura of calm readiness and measured resilience. She could feel the subtle vibration of the earth beneath her boots, the rhythm of her heartbeat aligning with the natural pulse of the land, and she let that awareness settle her thoughts, reinforcing the clarity of mind and certainty in action that defined her presence on her own property. The night seemed to draw in closer, the shadows deepening, yet Olivia remained composed, her hands resting lightly on the porch railing, her posture projecting patience, integrity, and a calm strength that seemed to radiate outward, touching the edges of the field, the fence line, and the distant barn. She observed, calculated, and anticipated, fully aware of the balance of power in this quiet standoff, and each subtle shift in light, movement, or sound reinforced her steady confidence, allowing her to maintain a poised vigilance that neither rushed nor faltered, fully attuned to the rhythm and presence of the land she had cultivated and the evening that wrapped around her like a protective shroud. The distant sound of a vehicle engine hummed softly over the gentle hills as a large black Humvee rolled slowly along the gravel road, its headlights piercing the shadows in the fields and illuminating the tops of the cornstalks with crisp beams. Olivia Johnson's attention snapped toward the sound, her posture straightening, hands resting lightly on the porch railing as she felt the subtle vibration of the approaching vehicle reverberate through the ground beneath her boots. A figure emerged from the passenger side, tall and solid, moving with a deliberate and assured gait that immediately commanded attention. The uniform was precise, adorned with the insignia of special forces, and the silhouette radiated confidence and experience honed through years of disciplined training. The soft crunch of gravel under his boots echoed against the stillness of the evening, mingling with the gentle rustle of the wind through the fields, carrying the faint earthy aroma of tilled soil and hay into the cool night air. Olivia's eyes narrowed slightly, a small, steady smile appearing as she recognized the figure stepping toward the farmhouse, each measured step sending a clear message of support and readiness. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation as Daniel Johnson moved closer, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere, a subtle but unmistakable recalibration of authority and security. Blake Carter and Mike Reynolds paused in their approach, their expressions flickering between assessment and surprise as the unexpected arrival challenged their expectations, their hands resting lightly at their sides, unsure of how to navigate the new dynamic. The wind swept softly across the pasture, bending the cornstalks gently and creating a rhythmic swaying motion that seemed to underscore the shift in balance on the farm. Daniel's gaze met Olivia's, a brief nod passing between them. Unspoken understanding and trust communicated effortlessly, as if decades of shared experience and familial bonds could be conveyed in a single gesture. The Humvee's headlights caught the outlines of the barn and the garden, casting long shadows that stretched across the field, highlighting the depth and texture of the land, the fence posts, and the soft undulations of the terrain. Olivia shifted slightly to make space on the porch, the wood creaking faintly under her weight, and Daniel moved with quiet precision, positioning himself to provide both support and assurance without disturbing the natural flow of the farm. Blake Carter adjusted his stance, the tension in his shoulders subtly relaxing as he measured the authority and composure now present, a sense of recalibration settling over him and the other officers as the gravity of the arrival became evident. The quiet of the night, punctuated by the gentle chorus of nocturnal insects and the distant lowing of cattle, enveloped the scene in a tranquil yet charged atmosphere, every sound amplified in the stillness, every movement carrying weight and meaning. Olivia felt the familiar warmth of reassurance ripple through her, her hands still resting on the railing, steady and deliberate, the presence of her brother adding an unspoken layer of protection and clarity to the space around her. The moonlight brushed softly across the fields, illuminating the patterns of growth in the crops, the textures of the soil, and the gentle contours of the land that had been cultivated with care over generations. Daniel's gaze swept the perimeter, the subtle tilt of his head assessing, observing, and signaling readiness, each motion calm, controlled, and deliberate, a measured contrast to the earlier tension that had gripped the patrol officers. Olivia inhaled slowly, the cool night air filling her lungs and mingling with the faint, sweet scent of evening blossoms and freshly turned earth, grounding her further and reinforcing her composure as she remained poised and attentive, every muscle relaxed yet ready, every thought centered on clarity and observation. Blake Carter and Mike Reynolds took a small step back, their postures subtly shifting, acknowledging without words that the dynamics of the encounter had irrevocably changed, the quiet presence of discipline, experience, and familial solidarity radiating outward, commanding both attention and respect. In that stillness, with the wind whispering through the fields and the subtle vibrancy of the night surrounding them, Olivia and Daniel stood together, a unified front, calm yet unyielding, the soft glow of the porch light highlighting their determined faces as the farm seemed to exhale, settling into a rhythm of quiet assurance and poised vigilance that promised resolution without confrontation, clarity without escalation, and strength without aggression. The officers stood in quiet reflection, the earlier tension slowly dissipating into a subtle acknowledgement of understanding, their postures easing as the presence of Olivia Johnson and her brother, Daniel, conveyed a calm authority that required no words to be respected. Olivia stepped lightly onto the edge of the porch, the wood creaking softly under her weight, her eyes meeting Blake Carter's with a gentle firmness that carried the weight of conviction and the history embedded in the land around them. Daniel remained a steady silhouette beside her, his movements precise and composed, a silent signal of readiness and support, radiating the quiet reassurance that had begun to reshape the atmosphere of the farm. The night air carried the earthy scent of freshly turned soil and distant hay, mingling with the subtle sweetness of late-season blooms, and every gentle rustle of leaves, every soft call of nocturnal creatures, seemed to underscore the shift in dynamics, a natural cadence accompanying the human exchange of respect and reflection. Blake Carter lowered his hands slowly, the stiffness in his shoulders easing, and his eyes flicked toward the farmhouse, noting the deliberate calm that Olivia maintained, the small details of her posture and expression revealing patience, resilience, and an unshakable sense of purpose. Mike Reynolds adjusted his stance as well, the faint metallic click of his badge catching the porch light, and he exhaled softly, the tension that had marked his presence dissipating as he observed the composed strength of the family standing before them. Olivia allowed herself a moment to breathe, the cool night air filling her lungs and bringing with it a sense of clarity, her hands resting lightly on the railing while her gaze swept across the gentle slopes of the pasture, the long lines of fence posts, and the rows of cornstalks swaying in the soft breeze. She noted the subtle way the shadows fell across the barn and garden, the gentle shimmer of moonlight on the trough, and the quiet rhythm of her heartbeat aligning with the muted pulse of the land around her, a grounding that reinforced her composure and presence. Daniel's eyes moved slowly over the field, observing the officers with measured attentiveness, his slight nod conveying reassurance without dominance, the embodiment of steady guardianship that complemented Olivia's poised confidence. The soft ambient sounds of the farm, the rustle of leaves, the distant lowing of cattle, the faint hum of insects, merged into a symphony of night, amplifying the sense of peace settling over the scene, the land itself seeming to affirm the resolution forming between the parties. Olivia's voice broke the silence softly, calm yet firm. We appreciate your willingness to listen and understand. This land, these animals, this home, are part of a legacy, and it is cared for with respect and diligence. We ask that you acknowledge that as you conduct your duties. Blake Carter tilted his head, the faint lines of contemplation crossing his face, and he offered a subtle nod, the rigid authority tempered by recognition of the integrity and conviction evident in her words. Mike Reynolds mirrored the motion, his posture relaxing further, the atmosphere lightening as the officers began to step back, giving space without relinquishing professionalism, their respect conveyed in the silence and small gestures rather than overt acknowledgement. Olivia allowed a quiet smile to appear, the tension in her shoulders releasing as she felt the balance shift toward understanding, the protective embrace of her home reinforced by the shared recognition of care, responsibility, and unspoken authority. Daniel exhaled slowly, the night air carrying the faint scent of fields and foliage, and he cast a brief glance toward Olivia, a nod of shared acknowledgement passing between them, affirming the subtle triumph of integrity, calm, and familial strength over assumption and imposed authority. The porch light continued to cast its gentle glow, the shadows dancing softly on the farmhouse walls, the soft swaying of the cornstalks and the distant silhouettes of the hills forming a natural tableau that celebrated the quiet resolution. The harmony of understanding now settling over the farm like a protective, gentle cloak, encompassing all within its peaceful reach. The first light of dawn began to stretch across the horizon, soft and pale, casting a gentle glow over the rolling pastures and the farmhouse that had weathered countless seasons. Olivia Johnson stood at the top of the porch steps, her eyes sweeping over the land, taking in the subtle hues of the morning light as it illuminated the fence posts, the garden rows, and the distant silhouette of the barn. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dew-laden earth and the sweet fragrance of morning blossoms, mingling with the earthy aroma of tilled soil that had become part of the rhythm of her life. Daniel Johnson remained at her side, his presence steady and calm, the quiet strength radiating from him a reassurance that settled over the farm like a protective blanket. The soft rustle of cornstalks in the gentle breeze, the faint lowing of cattle beginning to stir, and the distant call of a rooster all combined to create a symphony of serene life, each sound amplified by the stillness of the awakening morning. Olivia's gaze lingered on the horizon, where the sky shifted from deep navy to soft shades of pink and gold, the subtle light reflecting off the trough and the windows of the farmhouse in delicate patterns that danced across the earth. She felt the steady rhythm of the land beneath her feet, the cool wood of the porch under her palms grounding her, reinforcing the quiet sense of victory and peace that had settled over the night. Daniel's eyes scanned the perimeters of the farm, a subtle nod to Olivia acknowledging the calm, unspoken understanding that they had maintained their home and their space with dignity and grace. The patrol vehicles from the previous evening were no longer visible, the distant road quiet, and the faint echo of their presence had faded into memory, leaving only the natural sounds of the farm to accompany the rising sun. Olivia inhaled deeply, the morning air filling her lungs with clarity and reassurance, and she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the continuity and resilience of the land, the structures that had been built and maintained through care, and the legacy that she and her family upheld. The subtle flicker of light across the leaves, the gentle sway of the cornstalks, and the soft texture of dew on the grass created a natural rhythm that mirrored the composed heartbeat within her chest, each beat synchronized with the quiet pulse of the farm. Daniel shifted slightly, adjusting his stance to take in the open expanse of fields, his movements measured and deliberate, reflecting the readiness and vigilance that came from experience, yet tempered by the peace that now pervaded the property. Olivia's eyes moved across the garden, noting the rows of vegetables, the subtle colors of new shoots, and the delicate patterns of life thriving under her care, each element a symbol of attention, patience, and steady nurture. The farmhouse itself seemed to bask in the soft morning glow, the light casting long, gentle shadows across the porch and lawn, highlighting the textures of the wood, the stone foundation, and the surrounding land in a quiet celebration of endurance and continuity. Olivia allowed herself a small, satisfied exhale, the cool air carrying the sounds of awakening life, the whispers of wind, and the distant melody of birdsong, and she felt the calm assurance of a night resolved and a day beginning anew. Daniel offered a subtle, affirming nod, and Olivia met it with a small, serene smile. The understanding between them unspoken yet fully present, the quiet strength of family and stewardship wrapping around the farm like the gentle morning light, and in that shared, peaceful observation, the farm seemed to exhale, settling into a rhythm of calm, resilience, and quiet triumph that extended from the porch to the farthest fields, a testament to vigilance, care, and unwavering presence.